welcome everybody to this webinar that CPCS have arranged on the 6th of April. Everyone can see that.
Could somebody just type into the chat something external just to make sure that we're live and they can hear us? Someone can just type a yes, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you. We got a response to you. Just to introduce myself, I'm Paul Taylor. I'm head of card schemes, and we'll be chairing this session today. Online with us today, once my screen catches up. Technical issues. So yeah, today's to act as a reminder of what's going live with CPCS from today, and a bit of a brief recap into the CITB standards and grants, etc. Online, as part of the presenting team today, as well as myself, we've got Carl Hassel, who's Group Director of Job Cards, Charlie Skin, Product and Services Coordinator, and Andy Rankin. Andy is our technical developer, and he will be taking us through the main presentation for this session, with support from ourselves as to answer any questions as we go along. We're scheduled for an hour on this session, and just so that we all get the best and what in our expectations from this meeting, I'd just like to run through a few pointers. We've probably all been on Teams meetings before, but I just want to run through a bit of a reminder. If we can all remind ourselves to stay on mute throughout the presentation, unless you're asking a question. In order to answer questions throughout the session, we've actually included breaks following each particular session of the presentation, so that will be an opportunity to ask questions relating to that session. The way you can answer questions, if you could raise your hands, and this is done by selecting the icon on screen with the hand symbol, and obviously once you've asked your question, you'll be asked to ask your question, and once you've asked it, just tap the icon to remove your hand again. Also, you can submit your question by adding it in the chat. So if you select the chat button, you will then present it with the text box. You type in your question and then either hit enter or press the arrow key to move on. And I appreciate there's quite a few people online today, so if we do get some intermittent technical connectivity issues, sometimes it's better if we turn your video cameras off, and that helps with connectivity going forward. Hopefully that's the sort of preamble for this meeting, and what I'd like to do now is ask Andrew Rankin to start his presentation, please.
Okay, let me just okay, you can all see that, yes?
Yeah, I see that, Andy, yeah.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. Just going to run you through just a couple of points. And as Paul pointed out then, that we're going to have a little question session at the end of each of the sections, just so that we can get some feedback, and then we'll move on. So we're going to cover a little bit about CITB standards review, the funding and grants. Then we're going to look at what's actually happening from today onwards with regards to the CPCS, profiling, technical tests, and then the trainer card at the end. And as I said, there'll be a session at each end of it to discuss any questions. And Paul's already mentioned about how we go about doing that. So just to quickly go back over again then. So obviously the training standards, first phase of the changes, new standards introduced for 8 of the most used plant grants. These are going to be the 360 excavator above 10-ton tracked, forward tip and dumper wheeled, rear tip and dumper, articulated chassis all sizes, right on roller, telescopic handler all sizes excluding 360 slew, industrial forklift, plant and vehicle marshaller, and then the slinger singler, all types, all duties. For each of those standards, so as you can appreciate, you've on TCMS, you've had access to these standards for the last 4 weeks, which we'll discuss a little bit later on. But each standard is going to have a novice and experienced operator standard. And just to make it clear as well that the CPCS grants for the remaining categories endorsements that CPCS provide will remain unchanged. The reasoning behind this then, CITB conducted working groups which reviewed the current plant training standards, which are expected to be published during the summer of this year. One change that was identified was the inclusion of the experienced operator route. So basically that means an experienced operator will need to undertake training regardless of operator experience. And later on, we'll discuss a little bit about the profiling that will be required to be carried out then to determine this experience. And all awarding organisations will be subject to the same change in these standards that leads to a card carrying the CSCS logo. So, okay, we'll take this opportunity now just to have any questions on the proposed training standards.
So just to reiterate, Andy, just so everyone's aware, the latest update from CITB is that the standards are looking to be released in late spring. We have not received any exact date as yet, but we are assured we will get a month's notice before the implementation. And as soon as we get that confirmation date, that will be sent out to all the centres for when the introduction of training is going to be required. We've got a question from Mandy. If you'd like to ask your question, Mandy. On mute. Right. Let's see if Mandy's actually on. Can anyone hear Mandy? No problem. I might try the chat option if you can, Mandy, and that might help.
I can see Mandy's typed in the chat that she's having problems with the mic.
Yeah,
so she's able to type. So
questions from anyone? See if that works.
okay, so I think all mics have been muted for anyone external, Paul. So I think if anyone needs to ask a question, they're going to have to type it, unfortunately. Yeah, so just to reaffirm, CITB are going to give us a month's notice when they launch the 8 standards. We've given everybody as much information as we can around the standards. The standards development teams continues to meet and make tweaks. What we'll do, as well as soon as we get the 30 days notice, we'll organise another webinar to drill down and concentrate and do all the FAQs on the training standards as and when we get that 30 days notice, because we don't want to do it before, because things are frequently changing. Suggest we move on to the next section, please, Andy.
Okay, so the expected grant rates. So for those who require some training before taking the test, CITB have introduced an experienced plant grant rate, and to be eligible for that grant, experienced training will cover all the elements covered within the new training standards. So those are the standards that have been available on TCMS for the last 4 weeks that you've had an opportunity to review. Separate higher novice grant will be available for employers who are putting staff through plant training for the first time, potentially, who have never had experience in this type of machinery that they're being trained in. And this will help then with the industry's need to provide more competent, highly skilled plant operators. So these are the current grant rates and expected rates for the 8 standards that you've had access to on some of the updates. So there's a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 rate for the different types of plant machinery. I'm not going to go into this in great detail because, as I said, these are the current and expected rates. However, as I said, these are currently published, but could be potentially subject to change. The training materials, as I said, that were on TCMS have now been removed following the review period. Would like to thank everybody for your feedback on that over the past 4 weeks. And we are going to then conduct a review of all the feedback and then make any necessary changes to our documentation. Okay. Any questions on this section?
Just looking at the count of the guests there, I think Mandy was trying to get a question on the previous session, Andy. What if we've already taken bookings for novice training from a CITB levy paying client and then CITB give us only 1 month's notice? So the information we've received from CITB is that once that date has cut off, that'll be a discussion you'd have to have with the client in relation to the CITB levy grant paying organisation. CITB have intimated that if all elements are not met, then no grant will be paid out after the date. So if you've got any training that has been pre-booked, that would have to be directly asked of CITB if they were going to allow any concessions to include training that was delivered or included after that date. That's answered Mandy's question.
Sharon, there's a question there about the theory test sheets. Sharon, we're going to cover theory test sheets a little bit later on in the presentation, so we can discuss that question then, if you don't mind. Question about profile sheets as well. As I say, we'll come back to that because we have a session later on where we're talking about profiling. Okay, I think we're okay to move on. Okay, then from today, what are we doing as CPCS? We've taken a review into the delivery model to reflect the requirements of the changes to the plant training standards and grants. So during that period of review, we have kept you up to date via social media and other methods in order to let basically yourselves know what the changes are, employers know what the changes are, and that was conducted through updates. So you can refer back to 203, 204, 205 updates to give you more information. Oh, a bit weird. So just to give you a quick overview then of what's happening, starting on the top left. So part of the review was to look at the delivery method of the CPCS technical tests. So what has actually come out from that review then basically is that we've reduced the theory test time now down to 30 minutes for all tests apart from A61, A62, which I'll talk about in a little second. We've also reduced down the number of questions that will be asked to the candidate to a maximum of 40 questions. Again, we will discuss the theory tests changes in the next section. We've also introduced new off-site categories, which is A15 forklift side loader, the wheel loading shovel A21, track loading shovel A22, and A33 agricultural tractor to give the test centres a little bit more flexibility in the delivery of these tests. We have updated the CPCS practical tests to include the operator manual questions. So we've effectively removed the operator's manual being asked during the theory questions, and we've now moved it to being conducted during the practical, the pre-use and run checks part of the practical test. We've also removed the requirement to be VQ registered for a second red card, which means effectively that once you've applied for your first red card, if that card runs out and gone past the grace period, if you need, you can basically enter back into the scheme again and conduct your technical test to apply for a second red card without the need to be VQ registered. We've also removed the LGV requirements to apply for the cards on the categories like vacuum excavator, for example. And we've reevaluated the CPCS tester criteria, and also the trainer cards applications have now gone live, so that you can start applying then for your trainer card for the upcoming training standards. Profiling. So part of the PRSO and also the training standards, there is a requirement then to carry out profiling. The profiling document that's available on TCMS has gone live today for centres who wish to use it. Currently, this profile form is not a mandatory requirement, but it will be mandated when the training standards go live. So I'm sure there's going to be some questions on this phase. So just take a look at the chat.
The question from Chloe is obviously looking at why we couldn't get this done before the launch date. It purely just a booking issue, trying to get it arranged in time to be able to get this done before we went live. So we tried to get it done as quickly as we could, or as soon as we could, to the go live date. But scheduling issues prevented us from getting it out before today, unfortunately. Question from Matt Goldstraw. Is the test centre notifications going to be changed to 30 minutes? As notified a test for Saturday, and it's still 60 minutes. We have the new practicals been uploaded? From my understanding, the practicals have been updated to reflect the changes to the inclusion of the theory element into the practical for all categories that require the use of a manual, and all tests should have been changed to 30 minutes. Apart from the supervisor and the A61, but I believe there's been a question raised relating to the A61 theory, which I believe Charlie's now looking into for us. And again, we'll check that timings for out of hours on a Saturday, or if it's within hours, I'll check that one for you. That's Matt Goldstraw. Russell Harris, do we need to use the profiling sheets, etc., for non-levy paying customers? As Andy said, the use of profiling sheets at the moment is purely voluntary at this time, but once the training standards go live, they will be mandatory for all CPCS activity. Even if there are non-levy or non-grant purposes, it's a requirement of the PSRO framework that an individual's ability has got to be profiled before any training or testing is undertaken, as well as a CITB requirement. Again, I believe that Stacey's raised again, Charlie, with the A62. It's a question from Haddon Boardroom. Is the reduced time for theory test mandatory or guidance, please? The reduced time is basically, as we've reduced the theory down to 40 questions, it was logical that we drop the theory time from 1 hour to 30 minutes. This is extendable at the discretion of the tester, as it currently states in the ACOD as is now. So if you've got a person who needs a slight amendment or reasonable adjustment for learning difficulties, etc., then that time can be extended at the tester's discretion. And also, if you're using an interpreter, the time can be doubled. Mary McLean, CPCS downloads, has it been uploaded to reflect the new theory questions? Charlie, can you confirm if that's we have now got a section within TCMS, I believe, that has now all the live documents from today?
Yeah,
correct?
everything should be in TCMS documents that was due for delivery today. So and I'll have a look at any sort of theory test issues around the test papers. That's what I'm now looking at now.
Just a wee question from Tony there. Just, is the progress report mandatory? The progress report is for the training standards, so that's not going to be mandated until the training standards are released. Mandy, the question there about the theory test, I'm going to cover a section on how the questions, when they're randomly selected, how the candidate can get a copy of those. So I'll go through that a little bit later on.
Manchester Plant Training. For non-levy grant customers, can they just do the theory and practical as they do currently, or do they have to do the training prior to the test? So just to confirm, things continue as they are now as normal with regards to theory and practical delivery. Once the training standards go live, if a person's not eligible for claiming grant or doesn't want to claim grant, then you can undertake, or you can go outside of the recommended training, so you can create a bespoke training package for the person's needs and then do the theory and practical as is now. But as you can appreciate, no grant will be eligible for the theory or practical test because they will not be standing alone for them 8 categories. For all the other ones, for the non-8 listed that Andy showed earlier, all current grant funding is available for all current categories and endorsements until such times as a new standard is reduced or introduced for that category. Mary McLean, is the profile sheet the same as MPOs are using at the moment? What about NOCN job cards? I'm not sure. You might have to extend on that one. The profiling sheet that we're aware of is it's similar, I imagine, in most. When you undertake any profiling of any candidate, there's only a certain things you can use as experience. It's similar in design to other existing profiling sheets, but it's not. It is one that has been bespoke designed for a CPCS. Sorry, Sharon. Sharon's asking, I'm not convinced this is going to work on Tuesday. Confirm if equally turns up, are you, my staff, allowed some leeway for new papers? Seems unfair to happen over time at some people. Yeah, Sharon, just to confirm, the EQAs obviously during this transitional period are taking a flexible approach. And if you're having technical difficulties obtaining the new theory questions, etc., then obviously they will apply flexibility. And obviously work with centres to ensure that we can get any issues resolved.
Yeah, the name contacts can support on that as well.
Mandy, I've been asked the same question as Manchester Plant Training about if they choose not to take the grant, do they have to endure the lengthy durations for experience? As we mentioned before, Mandy, just to confirm, if they're not a levy paying, not a grant eligible company or an individual that's not eligible for grant, then no, you can actually, if you can remove away from the stated durations in the training standards, but you will still need to require to profile the person prior to theory practical testing. And if that profiling indicates any training, then you just develop the training as per that individual needs. So NOCN job cards website, will the new theory questions be on this website? Andy, if you could just pick that up for me.
Yep. Currently the revision questions that are on the website are staying the same, because basically with the theory questions, the 40 questions that you're asking are taken from a bank of questions that reflect what's on the website. So the questions are the revision questions are staying on the website the same, because that gives knowledge and understanding to the candidate then for not only the category of plant that they're revising for, but also some basic health and safety knowledge as well. So currently they're staying the same.
So can you repeat the answer to the Manchester Plant question? I didn't quite catch it. What happens once training standards go live? Experienced candidates need to be trained in order to claim a grant. So yeah, just to clarify, once the plant training standards go live, if a candidate from an eligible company for grant arrives at your centre wishing to take the CPCS category for A59 for argument's sake, the centre would be required to profile them, and depending on the result of the profile, they'd either be experienced or novice. If they're looking for a grant, then the minimum durations as stated by CITB must be delivered, if you will. The only exception to that is that the theory can be reduced depending on the person's experience, theoretical training that is, on the person's experience, but that must be captured in the profiling sheet and justified why that training duration has been reduced for the theory side only. The minimum practical timing remains the same. If a person comes to you who's not eligible for grant As test centre can then undertake any training that the person may need, or directly go to theory and practical test, but a profiling sheet must be completed to capture that while you've gone straight to test, but they wouldn't be eligible for grant.
Yeah, if I can just come in on the a lot of employers are telling training centres that with the new durations and ratios, they're just going to forfeit the grant and just not bother with it. So we've currently got documenting all the feedback that we're getting, include feedback like that. Some employers on this call right now have fed that back to us, that you know, a 6-day telehandler training course for 3 people plus a day testing is not encouraging people to train to a standard, because the standards are not going to be used, so therefore they're going to sit on the shelf and not really be utilised. So we're feeding all this back to CITB, and again, they are constantly reviewing the feedback based on the information that they're getting. So yeah, you know, if you can name any employers or anything like that that are saying this and feed that into CITB, the same as that we're doing, I think it'll be better, because the whole purpose of having a training standard is that people adopt that training standard, and it starts to standardise training across the UK for all card schemes. And if it's too ambiguous and employers aren't going to follow it, then you know, it's not doing what it needs to do. So if you can feed that back to CITB, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, just picking up a
Or,
point made by,
or to us, and we'll feed it back. But we just need names of employers. And I know Kieran keeps putting his hand up. I don't know if he heard at the start of the meeting, but we're unable to enable microphones in this session. So if you could type your question, Kieran, that'd be great.
Can't do it, mate. Won't let me.
Oh,
I think you can hear us now. Yeah, I think the mics are working.
Okay,
Oh,
brilliant. Okay, Kieran, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, there's multiple that are scooting around my head that no doubt scooting around. You've just there, for instance, stated trying to get employers' names regarding, for instance, this 6-day telehandler with a day's testing. Everyone that I've spoke to, every company I've said, they're just going to let it go by the wayside. And obviously, the way in which, Carl, you just said that, I know you can't say that you agree with that. No companies are going to, nobody, you can't say that, but you said, can you feed back to CITB? We'd really appreciate that. Reiterates to me that the feelings within NOCN are probably the same as us at centres, because it's going to be detriment. It's going to be detriment to our training planning, our instructor, and the way in which we organise our instructors, testers, etc. And companies are just not going to fly with it. It's going to be a waste of time and a lot of money wasted, if you ask me.
Yeah, we're not a million miles apart, Kieran. And you know, there's some good that's been done in the background and people wanting to be positive, but at the end of the day, it's got to be achievable and affordable. And we are feeding those questions back to CITB. So you know, and again, this is aimed at levy paying employers. So if you've got a levy paying employer that wants to give that feedback, they can do it directly to CITB, or, you know, if they prefer, they can come to us and we'll speak to CITB on their behalf. But we need the names, because without names, it's not really tangible. So
no, understandable.
Okay, brilliant. Do you mind just going back on mute then, Kieran, while we carry on? That'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks, Kieran. Just to point that, Ben, but Sharon, you appreciate the timing has not been great for the webinar, but hence that's why we made as much information as we could available on the TCMS website to centres to help prepare for this transition. But obviously we do appreciate the comment on that one. Tony, let me just move down to Tony. Next question, is the course ratios the same? Again, I think what we covered there, Tony, just to clarify that if you're not claiming grant, then you actually move outside of the training standard, shall we say, and the training durations and ratios become specific to what that person or that company wants. And that one, as we've sort of covered already. I think someone's responded to Mandy directly there. That's from Manchester Training. Haven't agreed, but again, the new theory element. Not sure what the other centres think. So Paul Dunn's commented that we delivered the A62 today and used the new paperwork and it all went well. So we just want to clarify that because I think we might have had a bit of an issue before with one of the other centres. So we'll pick that up again. The point from Karen about the timing of the releases. Helen Brown, the ACOD needs to be updated again. The script asks the test to take the paper number, etc. Yeah, so currently what we've done with regards to the theory test, the ACOD is currently under review and will be published in the same format as the current test centre booklet. So we do appreciate that some of the content needs to be updated to match the theory test, but that's currently ongoing at the minute. Stacey's mentioned we've used a new theory test today and the testers have found it easy to use. Again, in order for a custom to claim grant, do our testers required to be registered as trainers as well as testers? Just to clarify, from a standards perspective, if you are delivering the training standards, then CPCS would require your trainer to be registered and hold the trainer card, but obviously Andy's going to cover that a bit later on. Helen Brown, why is there a need to state the make and model of the machine on the theory test paper? That, again, that is perhaps something that needs to be taken out because obviously now that the manuals has been moved, then that needs to be taken out of the theory question. Some of our clients have waited a long time to welcome a new revised theory test element, but the feedback I've had is still that the individual still has to learn and revise 80 questions beforehand. But again, the 80 questions on that one refer to the whole learning requirement for that category. As the new standards come out for that category, then the whole current bank for these categories can be reduced in line with what the new standards will require. And I believe when you look at the AO9, currently the question bank has actually been reduced down to 40 questions now. So what you'll find is if you print out the AO9 questions, every time you reprint that, it'll just be a reordering of the 40 questions because that's the technical nature of that category has been reduced in the standard. Something like 59 ratios. Yeah, another one on the ratios. Again, I think we've put the ratios a bit. Mandy learned to revise yet. Manchester has been amazed if grant claims CPCS goes down yet. I think Carl said it was currently 50-50, but yeah. Mandy, Carl, I will privately email you with clients I've spoken to again and read the feedback. Sharon, what are you actually achieving is to give MPOs more work, unfortunately. Manchester Plant Training, spot on, Kieran, yeah, report with. I agree. Just looking, I'm just scooting through some of a lot of them comments, and obviously everyone can read the comments. I'm just looking to see if there's any questions.
There's one there from Hannah. Just profiling sheet completed in advance. Answer to that is theoretically yes. The information, most of the information can be captured in advance prior to the testing. However, it will need to be verified by the trainer at the time, or the tester. That'll be signed off then by the trainer tester and the candidate. But yes, most of the elements of that profiling sheet can be completed in advance.
Yeah, for H, all the recording for this webinar will be available following this presentation, so you'll be able to revisit it and pick out some of the questions and obviously digest a bit more. But again, obviously, by all means, approach one of the team directly if you feel you've got any further questions following this webinar that you need to answer.
Gary Davis there. Appreciate the comment there on the A40 paperwork, working well. The script, just to make you aware, the current ACOD that is available has been slightly amended to reflect the manual questions now being part of the practical. However, we're actually conducting a full review of the ACOD now, and obviously you will get the 4 weeks notice in advance. and that is, we are looking at completely overhauling the ACOD and the scripts that you carry out prior to the recording of the questions. So that's in process at the minute.
Yeah. I think there's some questions there relating to the profile and other supporting evidence. Again, you can use other supporting evidence to complete the profiling sheet, but as long as the profiling sheet is completed and signed by both the candidate and the tester. This has got to raise, so Gary, this has got to raise the question once again, is the levy order? Yep, it's more of a question for CITB. Just having a listen. So Matt Goldstraw, just having a listen to Paul. Is there anything, any training is carried out leading to a CPCS card should be notified as well? Again, what you'll probably find, Mark, if you have an individual who's not requiring or not eligible to claim grant and is not completing the full training standard for grant purposes, then the notification of that training will not be required. And the reason being that it doesn't need to be notified is because it's not quality audited by, because CITB won't be paying a grant for it, it won't be audited by CITB.
Claire Hopkins' question there, just on the ferry questions being generated. I'll respond to that just a little bit later on when we cover that element within the presentation.
Question really. So again, you need to review the papers with mandatories. By these not being at the end of the theory test, if a candidate non-achieves on the mandatory, they will more than likely not carry out the test. Yeah, you can take that on board and have a look at that. Can a tester train the same student? Yes, they can, as we discussed on the road shows, as it will be an option available to the under the ATO requirements issued by CITB that the trainer and the tester can be the same person, then we will be adopting that methodology as well. Leslie, one of our instructors done a skid steer theory test this afternoon and all went well. It's good to hear. Thank you. Under Stephen Lifford, under GDPR, who is allowed to access the profile sheets and who is allowed to read them? On the GDPR, then that will be part, because it's CPCS requirement, CPCS paperwork, they'll be stored with all the other test paperwork as required, and that will be auditable by CPCS and CITB should they need it for grant payment purposes. So the point of all this is nothing to do with standards, it's all to do with CITB money for Manchester plant training. Not many more on this session, so should you not be waiting until everything has been upgraded? You could before rolling it out too. When will all the ACODs be available? Do not mention ATOs, please. Not a problem. We'll not mention ATOs again further, Sharon. So yeah, the ACOD is, we've had a number of centres looking at the ACOD with addition of the EQAs. Any feedback is currently being updated into the ACOD. Once all the updates and feedback has been put into the ACOD, that'll be then sent for our publishers for redesign, and then that will be made available for yourselves as soon as possible.
We'll just move on to the next session, Paul,
Yeah.
and there's not much left to do here. So
yeah.
Okay, so changes to the theory test then. So basically, except for A61 lifting operations and A62 crane supervisor, all CPCS categories will consist of a maximum of 40 questions. The 40 questions will be taken randomly from a master question bank. As I said, those question banks still appear on the website currently for revision, requiring the candidate to have knowledge and understanding of the full training content. But just to make you aware as well, some of the smaller categories or the add-ons, the endorsements, they will have a smaller number of questions. So they will they'll not be a full 40 set of questions. A17 still contains a mandatory question, as you're aware of. The theory test duration times have been reduced to 30 minutes with the same discretionary additional time allowance as granted by the tester. which is 25% of the time frame, which was the same as the when you had it for the 1 hour, that you were allowed to then take a further 15 minutes. So that's obviously now reduced down to the 30 minutes with the additional discretionary time. The A61 and A62 test duration will still remain at 1 hour, the same as when you're using a translator for the theory tests. And the A59 360 excavator still contains lift and operations questions, and that's obviously going to be subject to change then when the release of the training standards come in. But currently there is still lifting operations questions within A59. Okay, so just going back on some of the questions that was asked about the saving of the paper for a candidate. So I think a solution for when you're coming to print theory questions for the tester and candidate, depending if you're printing them off or you're doing them digitally. So once you've downloaded the theory questions from TCMS, you will have gone into the properties to unblock the macros and then save to your desktop and enable content. Once you've opened up the document, then similar to what you've done before, where you basically choose the category. Once you've chosen the category, say for example A09 for tip and dumper, you'll go down to the next drop box, which will basically choose, do you want to show the answers? Select questions and answers, and then hit the tab next to that says create paper. That will then create 40 random questions for that category of equipment. Before you do anything else, then go to File, save a copy to your desktop, and title that tester copy or notification number or the date, so that you've got a copy of that saved to your desktop. Go back into the document, the Excel sheet, and then without hitting create paper, because if you hit create paper again, that will randomly set another set of questions. Go to the do you want to show the answers tab, and then select questions only, and that will then give you a set of questions only for the candidate, and you can save that to the desktop then for the candidate. So carrying out that process there then means that on your desktop then you should have a set of questions for the tester, which shows the questions and answers, and a set of questions for the candidate, which shows the questions only. And then you can either print those off, put them on a USB pen, or whatever you need to do then to deliver the technical test. Changes to the CPCS practical test. Not much has changed realistically within the practical test, except the questions requiring the candidate to identify information from the operator's manual has now been removed and put into from the theory test and now into the practical test. So the first activity for the practical is that the candidate will use the operator's manual to identify pre-use and running checks. Then the tester will ask the question to identify an additional piece of information that was basically what you did in the theory questions, where you went and identified two sets of information. So the first requirement is using the manual to carry out the pre-use and running checks, and then the tester asks a technical piece of information from the manual, such as back tension or checking the hydraulic oil or something along that nature. That will then be graded within the fault section of the practical grading sheet, so it does carry a fault if the candidate wasn't able to identify the information correctly. Okay, what I'll do before I just go to any questions on here, I will just cover the trainer card information just quickly, and then we'll go for a final set of questions because I'm just conscious of time. So the trainer card, basically the trainer card applications are now available in TCMS, so you can actually download the form and now apply for the trainer card. On that form, it will give you the requirements of what you need to hold to be a trainer, and that information has already been submitted as well within the updates. And just to thank everybody who's already submitted your application, and those are being processed. So we'll just carry out then a final set of questions. back through these. I think we've lost Paul.
Just a bit of a
There you
technical
go.
issue there. Sorry, I'm just trying to get back into it. So one from Matt Goldstraw, though, relating to the lifting questions within the A59. So just to confirm, when you'll produce the A59 set of questions, the lifting questions are in the main question bank, so they will appear randomly. So in some papers you may get more than 2, you may get 1. Like I said, they are produced purely randomly within that process. In phase 2 of the release of the theories, what is planned is that any mandatory questions requiring the use of duties charts will be included as mandatories. But obviously we'll get more information relating to that as we get towards that position. Does the centre, so the centre, not the tester, must generate the paper? Again, if your tester is using a laptop out on site, they would have to print off the questions for the candidate prior to doing the test anyway, so nothing's really changed in the way we're doing things at the moment. We've begun to printing it out for candidates. By having to send the theory to test and print it out, this is going to create a lot of work. Again, what you'll probably find at the moment, if you were generating one set of questions or you were keeping one set of questions, there's no real difference to the way the questions are generated and printed out now. In that respect. Notice that there are new questions on some of the papers. These questions are showing on the support documents website. Andy, can you just pick that one up for us from Garmin? In relation to, we've noticed that there are a number of new questions on some of the papers. These questions aren't shown on the NOCN supported documents page.
No, the questions, the bank of questions that are being randomized now for the theory questions haven't changed. The only question that would have changed would have been the wording with regards to the tire treads for any of the wind machines, but the questions are the same.
Again, Pauline, are the practical test times staying the same as they are now? Yes, so there's no changes to the practical test times that were put into this update.
However, just to go back on that one, Gordon, if you want to maybe just drop us an email directly then, if for the ones that you think have changed, and I can have a look at that then.
And Mandy there just saying that was related to confirmation, so we'll look into that potentially. Charlie, once we receive applications, perhaps we could actually email centres that we actually received it and process it. We're just waiting on that one. I've answered that question. Just getting noted that have been submitted today at 60 mins. The theory test, do they need to be amended now? No, Jessica, what we're saying on that one is you print off the 30 minutes. If you booked a test that's notified for one hour, the EQA team and the test centre team are taking a flexible approach on this one, so you would allow you to bring your next tests forward, which would then allow you to maybe put a late notification in for any tests later in that day. So John, just to confirm for John, trainer cards will only be required once the training standards go live. So what we're doing is encouraging testers and trainers at the moment to apply for the trainer card. We'll process them but hold back sending out the cards until such times nearest to the release date. Will current CPCS testers be, from George, will current CPCS testers be enrolled automatically as trainers? Because we have to have an audit process, we will need an application for all trainer cards issued. So unfortunately, they won't be automatically issued with a trainer card. Again, that's for audit purposes with CITB once the standards go live. A61. So Stephen Chandler, A61 only used to have one question paper. Are we now allowed to give candidates taking the A61 theory test on the same different? The A61 will be the same. You'll just generate, and you can generate the same paper for all the candidates if you so wish on that day. Shoot. Manchester Plant Training. again, one from Manchester Training related to 1 to 5 question papers. Again, if a centre chooses, a new set of questions will not be generated as Andy described before unless you press that redo button or reschedule. So unless you change that, you will not get a new set of questions at this moment in time. To clarify on that one. Again, we're obviously looking at the costs of printing. Again, as Andy's covered there, you can actually have it on screens. If you're in a centre, you can actually produce the second set of questions for the candidate on the second screen. All done. On the AP theory, can we use the same theory paper, or do you use set for each? No, you can use the same, as we said before, you can use the same question paper for every candidate. Okay, 7 new questions in A56 theory. Again, that Garmin will probably have to get some directs. You might have to speak specifically to Andy on that question, Garmin, because none of the questions should have changed. It might be a spreadsheet issue.
No, I think what he's referring to there was a slight change to the questions regarding the engine brake and that, but I mean, it was just the questions have been slightly reworded on that one. But as I say, Garmin, if you want to give me a call directly or just drop me an email directly, I can just discuss that with you.
Administration into delivery of the theory there, all done. 30 minutes is ample for lift supervisor. New trainer and testers have to apply for new cards, as we covered. Yes, because of the audit process, we need to have the application and evidence, etc., for the individuals. Yeah, being treated as individual cards. And Pauline relating to the A17, asking about the additional questions about the manual questions being in the theory. This could take them over the allotted time. Yeah, that will be at the tester's discretion. I see any new questions coming in. I think a lot of the questions are relating to what we did before about the printing off the questions. Again, someone's picked up the 2 questions for lifting. Question from Gary: if we use an experienced tester who doesn't hold a trainer card to deliver the training, will this training be still eligible for grant? As we said before, the trainers have to be registered as trainers with the scheme for audit purposes for CITB grant.
Just one there from Pauline, just saying about the, yeah, I mean, simple answer is if we're now bringing the manual questions into the practical, then it will be down to the discretion then of the tester on the time frame to obviously take into consideration the time it takes the candidate to find the information.
Any questions in the theory test? Back to that one. Can you take a colour out of the theory question test sheets? It's going to cost money. Yeah, we can look at that one, but obviously you can print in black and white. You don't have to print in colour. I appreciate it. Obviously you're going to use a lot of black and white, but we can look into that for it. Can you use the same set of questions for multiple candidates? Yes, you can, Gary. That's fine. Virgil, as a tester, can I get access to the question bank for each category on my laptop due to not always getting to the training centre before the test starts? Yes, you can. You'd have to download the spreadsheet onto your laptop. You can access every category via the spreadsheet. Paul Dunn, A61 theory boxes need to be larger for candidates to write in the answers. If you can use the same set of questions for multiple candidates, how often is the centre supposed to generate new sets of questions for the test? Is there a rule about how many times the same set of questions can be used? No, not at this moment for Angela. That you can at this moment in time. That will not be quality assured at this moment in time. You know, just print off black and white. Yeah, sorry to answer before. Kieran has his hand up. Yeah, I'm just checking anyone now for hands. So we have Kieran first. If you want to pose your question, Kieran.
Yeah, it's. I've got to clarify this because I don't know if I'm mishearing or what. I heard and understood that every candidate has got his own self-generated bank of questions, so that whenever we're going to do a test, we click the generate and it generates a bank of questions, 40 of them for that particular candidate. Now, obviously, that's wrong because I've just heard now that we can use that same generated bank of questions. If we're doing 3 A56 tests in the one day, whatever, we can generate a bank of questions. So each of those 3 candidates are going to answer the same questions. Am I wrong? Have I misheard? Or is what I've just heard and understood there in terms of same test, 3 candidates, three same question papers? Is that correct?
Yeah, so what you've heard, Kieran, just to confirm, if you're doing one test on one day and you've got 4 candidates, in order to aid you printing out and not have to spend out lots of different questions, then yes, you can use the same quet for them candidates. Does that help?
Excellent. It certainly does. It certainly does. That's great. It's a lot less administrative issues than I expected. And obviously, my comment earlier on then is a bit different. The final thing, since I'm on, because no doubt, in fact, no, I won't ask the question because I'm taking up time, is about the trainer card and the requirements of it, because I know it's now a little bit different to what I was arguing at the roadshow. So I'll find it out without wasting time.
Yeah, by all means, come back to me if you need any more clarification on that, Kieran. Not a problem at all.
Yeah.
So, Tim Downs, we've got a question, Tim. I don't know if Tim's can get online. I don't know if you can, if you're unable to mute Tim or not.
Well, if you want to jump to Gary Davis in, Gary, you've got your hand up.
Gary, can you try and ask your question via unmuting? Well, Tim's just unmuted. Tim, what's your question?
Sorry, this is Gary.
Gary, go on, Gary, give us your question, sorry.
Going back to the question that just asked about using the same question paper for multiple candidates, what's going to stop a centre from printing one bank of questions off, 40 questions, and using them every time for all candidates? And the candidates are only revising them 40 questions.
Again, what we'll be doing is obviously taking that up via the quality assurance processes, Gary, on that one. So obviously, if we do get drift of that, then obviously we can take action against that centre if need be.
Yeah, I just find it, a bit weird that you could use one set of questions and keep using it over and over again.
Yeah, totally agree. We totally agree. And this is the sort of questions we like to ask ourselves during this development work. Because currently what I've been asked recently when we first started meeting about this was, how can we, when we always announced we were going to get 40 questions, a number of centres then started asking me, how can we get a full set of the questions? Because we need that to be able to train the candidates to answer the questions. So effectively what they were saying was, they don't undertake a full training, they just pick out the questions and give a questions and answer session as part of their training. And obviously to try and move away from that, this is the first step in a process to be able to say that all CPCS candidates are given the full training for what they need to answer it, because again, this is phase 1 of the future development of the theory questions for CPCS, with the aim being that we will have an app within a fairly soon space of time, which will then create a question bank every time specifically for that test. If you will, that's the future development, sorry. I know it's not a perfect scenario at the moment, but at the moment, what we find is a lot of test centres will actually just train the candidates in a training session on the theory and answer sessions. Oh, hopefully answer. Does that help answer your question, Gary?
Yeah, sample, cheers.
Yeah, thanks for that. Tim, have you managed to get you?
Yeah, got to go. I don't know why I double clicked.
Cheers.
It's just I've already been asked this one myself about the A61 from Paul, the corner brook training. The boxes need to be larger for the candidates to write their answers in. They don't have to use that piece of paper or that question sheet to answer the questions. They could have a question that's multiple lines and it's a one-word answer, and they could have a one-word or a couple of word question that has a multiple answer. They have a separate piece of paper that they write the answers on in relation to that. That way they're not being led by the size of the box or by the question. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
I think going back, just Paul, going back on, I mean, I'm seeing some of the things there about the randomization of it. I mean, just to go back to the, you know, it was a situation where if you had a choice of questions paper 1 to 5, you could have theoretically used question paper 1 continually, which meant that you know, when you were doing your training sessions with the candidates, you could just teach them the sequence of the questions so they knew what questions were coming up next. So what Paul's mentioned in there with the quality assurance side of things is that it is advised that you do randomize the questions so that you know, that they do get a broad understanding of the different, you know, the knowledge and understanding that's coming through. So it's you know, it's down to yourselves to change the question banks on each day or each candidate. But as we said, that, you know, you can use the same questions at the minute. Yes.
Sorry, Gary, do you have another question? Sorry, because your hand's still up, or have you is that the question related to? Same for Kieran. Have you any other questions, Kieran? Your hand's still up.
Yes, I just want to then clarify.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to then clarify that the question banks, let's say you've got an excavator test, 87 questions, no longer. The question banks that will be generated, regardless of the randomization of it, will still be a 40 questions selected from what we currently train and deliver at the moment. We train a full delivery package, but we go through all of that. So there isn't going to be any randomly generated questions that we will not have covered and delivered as part of our theory session. We're still doing it all. If we teach to the same standard, regardless, whatever 40 questions that they're going to get, we've covered them. Granted, there's no different questions going to be integrated at this point. Is that correct?
That's correct, Kieran. Yeah. So you could
Perfect.
say, like you say, if you went to the supporting documents and printed off the full set of current questions for that category, the 40 questions are coming from that, albeit that's one of, yeah.
Sorry, well, there's no need for any company then to change the way in which they're delivering training. All we're doing is we're putting a broader depth of knowledge into that candidate than what is going to be expected to be tested on. So it'd be foolish to try to reduce the delivery of training, and we'd be undercutting the training, the benefit for the trainee in any case. Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah, and that's the aim principle of it, is that you train against a set standard, and this is the training that you'll deliver. Yeah. And what we've done by doing what we're doing is actually just reducing the theory time effectively for centres and candidates.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, cheers for that. Is there any other questions from anyone at this moment? Let's see any chat. So it's just relating to the theory questions. Yeah. Sharon's had to go. Sorry, struggling to understand the theory element. What I'll do, Mandy, I'll probably try and contact you separately if that's okay, to discuss your questions. On the questions, are they going to be dated when printed off, so at the same sets? At this moment in time, no, there won't be any data or any markers on the actual question papers of when they were actually printed. But what you'll probably find is that as we now move towards introducing the app, other elements will be introduced in as we go through the year, and obviously you'll be given plenty of notice of any changes going forward. So I believe, unless there's any questions, that clarifies or comes as a new message. Sorry. Understand we must keep the theory forms for 3 years, do we? No, if you, Nick, just to confirm, if you want to keep your documents for a period of time, you can scan them electronically and then delete them. Or if your tester was doing the test on the laptop and recording it, you just save it as an electronic file from the fresh. That concludes this session, and so unless there's any further questions, someone does another question. Sorry, coming in. Yeah, so Helen, what we're saying there is Ellen's asking, is there ever going to be a point whereby when the test is booked, that entering the test reference number, it will generate the paper? That is the aim of the app that we're looking at developing at the moment, is that once a test is generated, the reference number will be generated once the test is notified. That can then be given to your tester, and the tester can then enter the testing via an app. They'll put in the test reference, and they will be then presented with all the questions and paperwork for that test to the electronic device or whichever platform they're using. So unless there's any further questions, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming online and appreciating that. I do appreciate the timing wasn't great, and it's purely down to a scheduling issue, but by all means, if you have any further questions, please contact any of the product team or your test center representative or the EQAs or myself and Andy, and we'll endeavour to answer your questions. Well, so unless there's anything else, I would like to bring the question to a close and thank you for your time and investment into the scheme. Thank you very much.